When you talk about the automobile and society, there are certain cars that just everyone seems to know about and have a story with. Things like the Ford Explorer, the Chevy Corvette, the Jeep Cherokee, those sorts of cars. But when you talk to automotive enthusiasts in particular, there's also vehicles that a lot of us also just have experiences with or know of because they've just kind of been these enduring icons in our lives, whether they've been a part of the foreground or just kind of over here in the background. This is Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and we're here to talk about one of those, the Dodge Challenger. I'm here with what Dodge says is going to be the final year for the Challenger and its four-door sedan sibling, the Charger, in these big, bad SRT Hellcat Redeye Widebody variants. So we'll talk all about what that means. And this is a special edition. This is the Black Ghost. This is one of a few that are part of the Last Call lineup, which are all various special editions for the cars. And this is gonna be kind of a quick hit because I only got this car for about 2.5 days. It's got a ton of miles on it. It's being aged out of the press fleet because it's been used and abused and loved as these cars should be, and it's time for it to move on. All right, so first let's talk about the Last Call series and this Black Ghost in particular. So the Last Call series is something that Dodge is doing with the Challenger and the four-door Charger. They're building several different special editions of them, and they're a mix of, you know, appearance packages versus performance stuff. The Black Ghost in particular is a little bit of both. So the history of the Black Ghost comes from the 1970s, a 1970 model year Challenger in particular. There was a man named Godfrey Qualls who became kind of legendary in Detroit, who was known for effectively drag racing a lot of people on Woodward Avenue in his black 426 powered Challenger RT SE. And he would win these races and then he would just kind of disappear off into the dark of night. And that's how that car became known as the Black Ghost. So for 2023, for one of these Last Call editions, Dodge made a Black Ghost model, kind of in honor of him and winning all those drag races. Now, I'm not here to support street racing because I would rather see you do it on the track, in this case a drag strip, but there's plenty of fun to talk about, and this car is a complete riot and handful on the streets. We'll get into that in just a second. But to make it a handful and a riot, what have they done? Well, like I said, this starts effectively with a Challenger Hellcat Redeye Widebody, which is to say supercharged 6.2 liter V8 under the hood. Normally that makes 797 horsepower, but here they bumped it up. They got the tune off the Challenger Super Stock, and it makes 807 horsepower, which should be more than enough for all of you. And it makes plenty of torque as well, 707 pound-feet. That is all fed only to the rear wheels through an 8-speed torque converter automatic, which is honestly the right choice. You don't really want a manual with this. I think it would detract from the experience. And it gets to those wheels through a special 3.09 to 1 rear axle ratio. So all that to say, it is plenty powerful. It is ready and willing to put power down to those back wheels. We have to talk about the wheels next and the tires because these are also gigantic. Everything about this car is excess and I love it for that. These are a 20 by 11 inch set of wheels, and in this case they are on 305 35 R20 tires. Now, this car in particular came on Pirelli All Seasons, which are not the tire for putting down 807 horsepower to the ground. You'll see that in the driving portion of this in just a second, but you know, they're doing the best they can in a fast-paced environment. And then when you try to slow it all down in that fast-paced environment, you've got a set of 6-piston Brembo front brake calipers. So mechanically, that's pretty much what's going on here. Obviously, you've got kind of the wider track, the wider wheels. You've got these fender flares that are part of that wide body. It's about 3.5 inches wider front and rear. You notice up front, they also have hood pins added here. The hood pins do not do the sole job of keeping the hood down. It does have the factory hood latch still, but the hood pins add a nice touch for the visuals and for the sense of security if you do end up drag racing this thing. Some other visuals with the Black Ghost in particular, you do have this interesting gator skin roof. This is a vinyl roof overlay, but really cool effect. It's very subtle. All the badging is blacked out. A lot of these, the Redeyes are gonna have red badging. In this case, it's just regular black badging. You've also got the Dodge lettering on the hood. And then moving around to the back of the Challenger, you do have this white contrasting vinyl tape stripe back here and the retro fuel door that is an extra cost option on a lot of these cars. That is kind of the deal with the Black Ghost model in particular, but I want to talk for a brief second about the Challenger in particular, because like I said, this has been around for quite some time. The first ones of the redone Challenger, which is factually not a Mercedes-Benz E-Class underneath, before anyone starts going on about that, it is not an E-Class, but there were some similar suspension geometry, some other bits shared with Mercedes-Benz, because these cars initially were developed when Daimler and Chrysler were partners. Now, These, of course, have seen a substantial glow up since then, but those early cars, the one I first experienced, were indeed one of the better things that came out of the Daimler Chrysler days. And I was a junior in college, I think, and I lived across the street from a Chrysler Dodge dealer, and I was driving a 1995 Mazda Miata that made all of 120 horsepower at the engine. They had one of these, not this one, but you know, new at the time, in plum crazy purple, parked right out front with a Hemi 5.7 V8 and a 6-speed manual transmission. And I strolled in there in my black $5,000 Miata and started talking to the sales manager, and he very clearly knew that I could not afford to buy this car. You know, there's no way I could afford this car. But he was also just super into the idea of letting me experience it for a little bit. And so he said, you know what, let me show you the car, let me get a set of tags, and let's go for a little drive. And he let me drive it around my college town. There are some fantastic back roads right out of the town itself, and I drove the living daylights out of that poor purple Challenger. And it left a mark on me back then that has clearly stuck with me ever since. And I just love the fact that that car is kind of what gave me another perspective. I had never driven a fast V8 muscle car with a stick that was, you know, brand new, and it was a really hot car when it first came out. They're still hot to the right buyers. And that was just a very special moment. So it's equally special now to get to spend some time with the final edition, the pinnacle of this Challenger. So let's hop behind the wheel and talk all about how this thing is to drive, because like I said, it is a handful. All right, so we're gonna slow down a little bit, and all I'm gonna do is mat it in a straight line. And what just happened there is I just did a rolling burnout on the interstate at like 65 miles an hour. And that, I think, is so silly. It is so funny. This car is so just fantastic in that regard. I mean, what other car have you ever driven that can do a rolling burnout? Now, part of that is the tire, a lot of that is the tire. If you had a grippier tire, of course, this is, you know, a drag racing icon or whatever. It's got a launch control mode, it's got all these, you know, drag racing setups and other track setups for all the software and stability control and everything. But the fact that on all seasons, you've got 800 horsepower flowing down to, you know, very wide, but let's be real, not very grippy tires, I just think is so funny. And I mean, that just describes the entire car right there, is it will do a rolling burnout. And so it's worth mentioning, as you know, see me going through some turns and things here, this is the kind of car that will drift and get sideways and silly at a millisecond's notice. And so even with merging right here, which normally I would make some cutesy comment about, oh, whatever, I have to accelerate quickly for safety. I have to be careful for safety in this car because there's Jersey barriers up here, and I don't want to put this into a wall. So I am going to leave it in its automatic mode. That was true. That was truly like this much throttle. That was nothing. Oh boy. Okay, so like I said, it's quick. The tires, you know, are not really what I would choose for this kind of a vehicle. But if you want to do burnouts and drifting everywhere, she's your girl. Some better rubber, some all seasons are not cutting it. If you want some summer tires on this, I think they're a $0 option if you really are looking for that. All right, we'll give it one more full throttle run here. That is the single best thing you can do with this car, is just floor it everywhere. It is so much fun. The way it shifts, the way the all seasons really actually give it some character that I just love, despite wanting grip. Like, it shimmies the back end when it shifts. Like, that's just hysterical. And it does rolling burnouts, and it'll drift around every corner, and it's so just fantastic the whole time. And I'm gonna downshift it here, get it out of 8th gear so you can hear this a little better. But the supercharger makes a fantastic noise as you're just, you know, hustling your way downtown. Of course, I've got 2 buses here now. Yeah, this is just, it's just so cool. There's a visceralness to the whole thing where you don't get it with a V6. You don't get it with a Turbo 4. You don't get it with an EV. The noise, the vibration, the harshness, the things that, you know, manufacturers want to tune out of a luxury car. This is the exact opposite of that. This is snarling, roarty, ripping, stupid, just so egregiously fun because the whole thing shakes and shimmies and rattles and rolls and bops around and just is so uncivilized. And the more we have technology advanced things, the more we're going to get away from that unless it's intentionally baked into something like it is here. So I just love what they've done. You have to be careful with your right foot because, especially on these tires, unless you know what you're doing, this is frankly pretty scary to drive. Even for me, who's comfortable doing dumb stuff in fast cars, this was a lot at first until I really got used to it. And I'm still not that used to it. And it's just so fast. Like you can't use the power anywhere unless you're in a drag strip. You know, the speedometer goes to 220, which is obviously not indicative of how fast it'll actually go, but I think this will do a solid 180, 190, maybe 200 if you've got enough space for it to run. I feel like it totally would. So, you know, it is what it is in that regard. Now, as for the rest of the car, it's very, you know, like I said, it's not a luxury car. It is what the LX platform and whatever it evolved into. This is not called an LX at this point. You probably can't hear the supercharger on the camera, but my goodness, it sounds so good. Superchargers make me feel funny things inside. Anyway, these cars I've always liked these cars. You know, if I've gone on vacation and gotten one as a rental car, even in the most basic, like a V6 spec, I just adore them because they're so comfy, they're so big. You know, unlike the Mustang and the Camaro, this is the one that you can actually use and put 4 adults in easily. And it's wonderful for that. It's a big car as a result. This is not, you know, the first sort of thing I would pick for like handling prowess. This is much more a straight line car, as we've talked about. You know, I think it'll handle enough. If you wanted to do some back roads, if you want to do Tail of the Dragon or take it to a racetrack and do some track days, it'll do it, you know, with the right rubber. It's just going to be bigger and less athletic in that regard than a Mustang or Camaro, but, you know, this wins in those other regards in a lot of cases. The visibility, though, for how big it is actually pretty decent out the front. The windowsills are low. It feels very old school in that regard. The dash is nice and low. Sit up high, though. I want the seat to go down like an inch or so lower, and it just won't do it. You're sitting on the car, not in the car. The sound system is great. I've been blasting Little Old Lady from Pasadena over and over and over because it's the only song you should listen to in this car. Otherwise, you know, it's just so delightfully old school, but like in a way that's just modern enough. And I understand they have to kill these, but this is so special to get to experience one more time. I think looking back at that purple one that I drove all these years ago, I mean, that must have been 2010. And we're 13 years into this car existing. You know, that left an impact, and they haven't changed it too much. It's been very evolutionary. You know, the supercharger sound and the wires for the hood pins fluttering in the breeze up there, and just the whole thing. Like, I think the fact that I'm a little scared of it makes it more fun too, because, you know, it's got power and it's got some semblance of grip. You have to be really careful with it. And, you know, there's not a lot of cars that do that these days. Everything's all-wheel drive, and even if it makes a ton of power and torque, it's like refined in how it does it and how it builds and delivers it. And this is just kind of like taking 4 sledgehammers to the face all at once. And, you know, there is a charm to that if you're the right buyer. A lot of people are not going to be the right buyer for this. I would not put a lot of people in this car and be like, yeah, here, just take the keys and go. That's not what this is about. It's not what these have been about. The more sedate models are a little more balanced in that regard. I've driven some of the others that have, you know, the 392 or even the basic 5.7, and those are a little different. This one is just Sledgehammer, and it is so cool in a way that not a lot of other cars replicate. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2023 Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat Redbody Black Ghost Last Call. It's a lot of words to say that these probably are indeed heading out. We won't see them again. The next one of these is going to be electric. It'll be a totally different kind of fun, but this is indeed kind of a last call to that old school, roarty, snorty, crazy V8 that a lot of us have come to know and love. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. If you'd like to join a community of fellow LGBT automotive enthusiasts, head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a whole bunch of people online who would love to meet you on our Discord server, on our Zoom calls, or see you at an event in person around the country. Till next time, please stay safe, be well, see you again soon.